One. Last month, unfortunately, the world lost a truly great person, Rabbi Feigelstock. This was a man who literally touched the lives of thousands of people. We're here today, event organized, to reflect on his life, to tell some stories, and most important, to receive some inspiration from the legacy of this extraordinary individual. I first want to thank the Feigelstock family for organizing this and allowing us to share some heartfelt words with you and all friends, Talmidim and Mushpoyim of Rabbi Feigelstock. I also hope that the younger generation of the Feigelstocks, the grandchildren and the great-grandchildren, after hearing everyone speaking here today, will get a deeper appreciation of what an unbelievable special Zayda that they had. There's a lot of speakers today, and we got to get going because I know everybody has a lot of stories with Rabbi Feigelstock. So I'm just going to start off this event by telling a personal story of how Rabbi Feigelstock touched my life and changed it forever. So since he never in his life got a dinner honoring him, I don't know if Rabbi Kramer ever organized a dinner honoring Rabbi Feigelstock. So today we're going to honor him at this dinner. I am obviously amazed that he was able to have such a arichas yomim, being in the position for so many decades between Rabbi Kramer and the Malamdim, and trying to balance the ship between these two forces. How he was able to do this, only Rabbi Feigelstock could pull this off. Nobody else would be able to do this. And to live such a long and prosperous life, that itself, my hat goes off to him. But this is the story. Like many of my classmates, I grew up in Montreal to Holocaust survivors. My parents were Holocaust survivors. They came to Montreal after the war. I was born. My father was all alone. He had no relatives. And he was befriended by Rabbi Moshe Chaim Sapachinsky. Yeah? Rabbi Moshe Chaim convinced him to come daven in Nusach HaRishon. Then ultimately they started to daven in Park Avenue in the Yeshiva down there. As I was growing up, 4 or 5 years old, the friends of my father's, Rabbi Sabachinsky and others, convinced my father, who was not a Lubavitcher and had no beard and had no connection to Lubavitch at all, to enroll me in the Lubavitcher Yeshiva. My father, at that time, there were 2 yeshivas in Montreal, Merkas HaTorah, which was Litvish, Lubavitch Yeshiva, which was Chassidish. My father came from a Chassidish background. He was a Stoner Chassid, although by the time he came to Montreal, he didn't wear any of the Stoner Levushim. But he decided, you know what, he had friends among the Lubavitchers, so why not put me into the Lubavitcher Yeshiva? And that's how many of my classmates came in. But the criteria was that it had to have a secular education. Because my mother, also a Holocaust survivor, insisted that I had to go to a normal school. My father did not know at that time that Lubavitchers were soul snatchers. He didn't know that they had an agenda. He thought, this is a school, they'll teach him, and he'll know how to learn Rashi and Chumash that Rabbi Feigelstock taught, and that will be that, but his son will continue to be normal. He didn't realize that Lubavitch has an agenda, that they don't only want your body, they want your soul, your mind, and everything. So I went through Lubavitcher Yeshiva, and through high school, which had a wonderful secular education at that time. And my mother was very happy because I graduated high school. And now, from my mother's mind, I'm off to college. Enough. Okay, you know what? You went to Yeshiva 11 years, you graduated, Mazel Tov, did everything you had to do. Now it's Dawson or some other CJEP and on to McGill. And hopefully, Ulay Efsher could be a doctor. That would make my mother so happy and proud. No, I was vacillating between, I was wearing a jacket and a black hat, and I was learning Chassidus already, and I didn't know what should I do. So one day Rabbi Ferguson calls me into his office and says, Abba, there's only one route for you. And what is that? Morristown, New Jersey. Morristown, of course, Lubavitch Yeshiva in Morristown. And I said, Rabbi Feigelstock, my mother, Holocaust survivors, I'm not sure they're going to be able to appreciate this. What do you mean, Morristown? They were college. They want me to make a living. What am I going to do? I'm going to join Chabad ranks and end up a shliach. And my mother survived Auschwitz for that. So he said, don't worry, Abba, I'll take care of it. You just commit and say you want to go. So I thought about it. A few days later, called me back, and he was insistent. I mean, Rabbi Feigelstock, if nothing was persistent, and eventually he got me to say yes, and he got my parents to agree and do this, and he arranged for myself and others, a bunch of us, to go to Morristown, get on a bus. Don't worry, what about tuition? Don't worry, Abba. And my friend Rabbi Tenen also was here, can vouch for this. We got on a bus and we ended up in Morristown, New Jersey. Subsequently became the first day they kicked us out. We came there and said, get out. Why? He made no arrangements. We said, Rabbi Feigelstock, nah, he just sent you. He sent you, but your father didn't make any financial arrangements. So 2 days later, my father made a financial arrangements. I think then the tuition was a couple of $1,000, and we were in Morristown. If it wasn't for Rabbi Feigelstock, I could have been who knows who today. Who knows? But now I ended up a shliach of the Rebbe, and it's all because of Rabbi Feigelstock's caring and love for his Talmidim, who took the time for a guy that had no connections. It was just a regular bocher in Yeshiva to make sure that I continued on this right path. So I'm sitting here today as a shliach of the Rebbe for close to 4 decades, thanks to this unbelievable person who cared about his Talmidim and set forth for I don't know how many people like myself, and for that itself is dayenu, would be enough just for my story. But my story is multiplied hundreds and thousands of times because he was a man that was of extraordinary talent and caring and refinement, and he also had a sense of humor. And I'm going to finish with this. When his youngest son was going to get married in California, I happened to be in Montreal. So I went over to him, as I always did when I came to Montreal. Shalom Aleichem. I said, Rabbi Feigelstock, when you come to California, let me know. I'd like to arrange a police escort from the airport for you. So he said to me, only one car? Why only one car? So he had besides everything else, and besides being known as the principal and a tough cookie, he had a tremendously warm heart and a wonderful sense of humor. And thank you again to the Feigelstock family for allowing me and so many others to be part of this beautiful, beautiful event. Rabbi Feigelstock, as everyone knows, was not only involved in the yeshiva, he was a man about town. Everybody in Montreal knew Rabbi Herschel Feigelstock. I mean, from people staying in his home and the Dachnasis Orchim and just about everything that he did. So we have, as our first official speaker, we have the chief rabbi of Montreal, Rabbi Benjamin Weiss, to please, great honor to have him here today. And I would like to give him the honor of saying a few words. Rabbi Weiss.
Shalom Aleichem to everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. But we can't see you.
We're gathered today, albeit virtually, l'chvoidoi le'zichroi shel harav hachosed hatomim Reuven, Tzvi Yehuda Rabbi O.B.M Olav Sholem, and the Shloshim le'pterus alechaya olam. I want to focus a bit on the Toyar HaTomim, because I feel that Rabbi Feigelstock was the quintessential Tomim. In the Torah, we find twice the mitzvah of Tomim. Tomim tia im Hashem Elokechu, and then we find that the HaKadosh Baruch Hu said to Avraham, "Es halech lefunai v'hayei somim." It seems to be the same mitzvah, but there is a difference. By Yaakov Avinu, we find Yaakov ish tam Yoshev Aholim, because Tamimus requires shleimus, not only by Udam Lamokaim, and also by Udam Lachaveroi. Yaakov ish tam, because he was a Yoshev Aholim, sitting in the Medrash and learning and having Dvaikas LaKadosh Baruch Hu, you can only achieve part of Tamimus. It's tam. To be Tamimus is a salach lefunai v'hayai somim. Not only tomim tia em Hashem Elokechu. When a person goes out in the street and he deals with people, and he deals with nefoshes, the way he deals with them, kol sheruach habriyos noch mamenu ruach hamukam noch mamenu, in that way you achieve Tamimus, shleimus and Tamimus. We find in the Mefarshim on Ayin Yaakov, they say that Tumim is a Lushon fin Ta'umim, twins, because Tumim has in it two aspects, Bein Udum L'Chavayro, Bein Udum L'Mukim. And thinking about Rabbi Feigelstock, we all know he was a Chosed B'chol Ramach Eivero B'chol Shesugidov, but he was also B'Shleimus and Bein Udum L'Chavayro person. Speaking to him, you felt it was a pleasure talking to him. It was a ta'anug, because he had the right words for everyone, and every word was measured and weighed and had a special mesikas b'neimus in it. You felt that he respected you. And not only when he spoke to you, his countenance, his face radiated Chazal say, Sichas chulin shel Talmidei Chachomim tzrichas limud. And there are many pirushim on that. What do you mean by tzrichas limud? But Rashi HaKodesh in Masechtas Avodah Zarah says, tzrichas Talmud, we have to analyze the Sichas chulin of a Talmud Chacham. Ledaber, kedei lislamed, ledaber b'lishonim shelush nekiya v'oisher umarpei. Lushan nekiyu, Lushan oisher, a rich way of talking, and marpei. He had the right words for everyone to be a marpei to the broken hearts. And Chazal say not only the right words are required, but toiv hamalvin shanayim lachavara yosem emashkai chulav, because the pasuk says eleven shanayim my chulav, libun shanayim. His smile also was a radiant smile, a smile with warmth and with acceptance, with respect and appreciation. So every word and every time I met him, I was impressed and warmed by his presence. HaKadosh Baruch Hu should help that his legacy should be perpetuated by his family, his children, his Talmidim, all the thousands of people that had a connection with him. HaKadosh Baruch Hu should help that he should be B'Shamayim, Mamelit Yorsha for every one of us, and his memory should be a trailblazer for us all, how to have to be b'shleimus dekatmimus tumem tia im Hashem Elokeinu in hisalach lefunei v'hayai sumem. Thank you, and Yehi Zichroi Baruch.
Thank you so much, Rav. Wonderful words. Thank you so much. I mean, one of the things, besides so many aspects of his life that it was astonishing, was also the fact that Rabbi Feigelstock and Rebbetzin Feigelstock opened up their home to so many people. You would think naturally that after dealing a whole day with yeshiva, with kids from kindergarten through Beis Medrash and Malamdim and all the problems, the last thing he would want is to come home and to find more people in his house, besides the large family that Baruch Hashem that he had. But the Feigelstock home was all open. I don't know if there was a front door. Was it a front door by you in the house? I'm not sure, because Bachrim stayed there. I used to hang out over there. I mean, and so many people had a relationship with him outside of the yeshiva, just hanging out at the Feigelstock home. Our next speaker really, I mean, he doesn't need an introduction. I mean, first of all, his father was one of the original 9, the original baseball team that came to Montreal in 1943 to start the yeshiva. He himself was a young bacher in yeshiva. I remember him as a kid. He was there, and he came to Camp Gan Yisrael, and then he left Montreal and he went on to conquer the entire world. The entire world. Of course, I'm talking about the Rabbi Moshe Kotlarski, who was the vice chairman of Merkas Linyani Chinuch. He is a friend. He's a mentor. He's just everything to thousands of shluchim, around the world, and he's well known, and that's why I really don't need to give him much of an introduction. And it's a great honor to have him here today. He had a special relationship with Rabbi Feigelstock. And if we're ready, Reb Moshe, you're on.
Great, Rav Arashi, beautiful words. The mishpacha and Klal Chassidim that are on this this memorial tribute. I actually spoke for the community during the Yeshiva, but it's a different type of speaking, and there are a lot of people that are going to be speaking today. So my relationship with Rabbi Feigelstock actually goes back to when I was a young child, because my father was one of the original 9, but he was one of the 2 that went to St. John's, Quebec to take out the group that came then that were in the DP camp. So whenever he used to come to New York, he used to come to say hello to my father. So that's from when I knew him. I knew him from that period of time. I knew him. He used to come in for a minute, especially around Yud Shvat when he was busy. If he couldn't come, he would call. There was even the one Yontiv that they were by the Frierdiker Rebbe, and the famous story of the chicken. They had to cook for themselves, and there were a bunch of guys, utensils that man nicht gehad, but when you know the chicken, and this as if ananda geflicked, and there were those that could handle it, and he had the chassidische lachluchias that in order to run to be by the Frierdiker Rebbe's table, they finished eating early. But I want to focus on 2 things of Rabbi Feigelstock. One is very personal, and one is something that we could really learn from. The thing that we could really learn from was that Rav Weiss touched on it as being a chassid. But in yesterday's parsha, we talk about the nafshei kshura b'nafshei. And the Yehuda in this week's parsha, when Yaakov Avinu gives out brachas, he gives malchus to Yehuda. How does he give it to him? He tells him, Yehuda, ata yeducha achecha. To you, your brothers are going to be grateful. What are they going to be grateful for? What are they going to thank him for? Was haben sie ihm zu bedanken? So the reason is because when Yaakov Avinu had to send out somebody to set up a chinuch, Baruch Yisrael Sova, the one that he sent was Yehuda. Why did Yehuda be zeicha to this? Because Yehuda said those magical words, Ki avdach ara v'sanar. He took responsibility for the youth. And being that he took the responsibility for the youth, he was zeicha to be the one to set up a chinuch Baruch Yisrael Sova. And somebody that is being mechanech his brother's children is ata yeducha achecha. You could be whatever you are, with the biggest shvatim and everything, but your brothers are going to be grateful to you. Aber es stellt sich the shaila, well, how does he give him malchus? He says, Yotcha b'yere feivecha. So es wissen sein, the gehst haben Reuven, the gehst haben Sonnen. Wenn jemand das von der Stamm kein Sonnen, was heißt, you'll have malchus, das nicht Stamm kein Sonnen. Elamai, anybody that is in any position of authority, especially in chinuch, sometimes you do this to a child, and parents have kindness in this. So what does he tell me? Through educating somebody, you'll be able to turn his head whichever way you want to. Your hand will always be in the nape of his neck because you'll be able to change him and you'll be able to turn him into what you want. This is, Rabbi Feigelstock had one magma, to be mechanech Yiddish kids, and to him what mattered most was the v'nafshei kshura b'nafshei, his iskashus to the Rebbe. His highlight of his life, of his year, was Yud Shvat, when he would bring Talmidim of the Yeshiva to go into the Rebbe, lav davke from Chassidish families, and the going into Yechidus to the Rebbe. And B'chlal, his whole life, and this is where we come to the personal. If I had a brother, of many you know, who passed away, his yahrzeit is on Chai Tevis, passed away in the Yeshiva Montreal. And the Rebbe said on him after the Shabbos afterwards, he called over my father and he said to him something that he never said about anybody else. He told my father, sitzt in Gan Eden und hat Chassidus von schwer. That the Rebbe should say something that he sees Lamaila and in such a way that he's saying it beyond from border as sitzt in Gan Eden und hat Chassidus von schwer. Yankiv David Olav Hashem was very, very close to Rabbi Feigelstock. And what bound him to Rabbi Feigelstock was the same thing that bound me. That I used to go in to talk to Rabbi Feigelstock a lot. And I heard from him maybe 100 times. And was trachste that the Rebbe trachte wegen them. We have to always think what the Rebbe is going to say about this. I was involved in a lot of things of Askonis in Montreal in the years that I was there from Tavshel Chav Zayin till the beginning of Lamed Aleph. And everything that we spoke about, his one thing was that is geben dem Rebbe nachas ruach. What is the Rebbe going to think about it? And this is what he was really Rabbi Feigelstock's life. And Yankiv David, who was a Chassidish bocher, he hung out very much in this house. But myself, when I came back to Montreal after I was in New York for a while, there were two people that gave me a menuchas hanefesh that Rabbi Ferguson would call me in to his office just to talk, to find out how I feel, to find out how I'm doing, how am I managing after Yankiv David passed away. And Bechlal, when I was the dorm supervisor, we had a lot of things that were in common that we used to talk about. And the other one was Rabbi Isaac Shveil. These two people were by me the pillars and the amudim of both Hafotzas and Mayonis at that time. Some of which Badul Chaim Torah, Rabbi Beryl Muchkin, and Rabbi Chicken Nevish were very involved in Hafotzas and Mayonis. And more than that, on a personal basis, they really took an interest in a young bacher who just lost a brother. And many, many times I went in to talk to him. So what we could learn from him is like this. I mean, his life was malchus because he was mechanech and mechanech beruch yisol sova to make people siddim and to make people anshe maisa. But more than that, he wanted them to be Yerushalayim, to be mekayim mitzvahs and mekayim and learn Torah and be mekayim mitzvahs. That was his magman life, and that was his malchus. But together with that, he didn't lose sight of the individual. So I just want to wish the Feigelstock family, they should know that they have to go and have strong shoes to fill. There are many people that they say, by the time they turn 12, they have done more than the parents have done. To live up to the legacy of Reuven Tzvi Yehuda, Hashi Feigelstock, is something that takes a lot of work, takes a lot of meaning, takes a lot of things that you have to take into account. And I remember from when I was a little boy of 5, 6 years old, and from my earliest childhood, I remember him, and I will always remember him as a chassid, as the quintessential Yerushalayim, as a person who was gelegen in Torah, not gelebt Torah, but more than everything, he had gelebt his kashrus. Should be an inspiration to his children and his grandchildren, and to all of those that came in contact with him. And soll wissen sein that true malchus is learning Torah with another person's children, because then whatever you'll do, your brothers will always be grateful to you. And that's the essence of shlichus, of learning with another Jewish child. So soll sein a gute better and haben a lichtige Ganeden und wir haben Elisha für die Mischpoche, für seine Mischpiem, für seine Mischpoim, für seine Mischpoim, für seine Talmidim, and for all of those that came in contact with him. Yehi Zichre Baruch.
Shkoyach, Rabbi Kotlarsky. Rabbi Feigelstock had his hand in so many different pies. I mean, primarily he was the principal of Yeshiva, and as Rabbi Kotlarsky said, he was mechanech, and he was zeicher to be mechanech thousands, and many of the shluchim around the world came from Yeshiva in Montreal. But that didn't stop him. He was involved, he started Camp Gan Yisrael, and he was involved in so many different aspects in the city, and not only in the Lubavitcher community. But one of the people that worked very closely with him is the Morad Asra of the Nash community in Montreal, the Dayan Harav Beryl Bell, and I would like to ask him to say a few words for us today. Reb Beryl.
Thank you very much, Rebaba, and Kol Akdil Akdesha, and everybody that's this is the way we gather together in a virtual form. And as has been mentioned, there are many people to speak, so I'll be makatzer at the risk of being mamayip ichvede from the Rav Feigelstock Olav Shalom. But the idea of Chai Yitan Alibe, that there's so much that we could take to heart in order to learn, not just the family members, but also everybody over here that's assembled. Speaking on behalf of the Anash community, of course, it's an unspeakable loss. But in addition to an individual, Rabbi Feigelstock was, in a certain sense, the bond to a previous generation, that a person that could speak about his correspondence and his closeness to the previous Rebbe, and how he treasured every letter that he had, and he would speak about it constantly, and letters from the Rebbe and Yechidus from the Rebbe. And as he explained, I mean, this is many stories. Hopefully the family will put together the history of his lifetime, that how he came to Chabad in general was Pele Ployim, the Ashkacha Pratis, how he ended up in Chabad, and how the whole idea of the existence of a Rebbe and his kashrus was totally hepach, anything that he had been raised with, and the transformation that he made, that the word from Rebbe was that it was so precious by him, and how he infused everybody around him with that, was really quite remarkable. And he was involved in addition, as everybody's mentioned here, the Inyane Chinuch, and him and his Rebbetzin Aleh Shalom, that their entire lives were given over, but he was also very involved in mikvois. Reuven Aleh Shalom was always miyayetz with him and worked hand in hand with him in Yon mikvois. And of course, the Beis HaChaim over here took over many in Yoneh HaKlal, hours and hours with tremendous pikchas and sensitivity that many people were not even aware of. Just like to take, in addition to the idea of a vart from Rebbe's avart, and then Ken Yokum. There's many examples of that. And some of them were recorded himself. The Gem has recorded the interviews with him about various things that happened. Just like to mention two things which I think in his later years, I think became even more pronounced. His incredible sense of gratitude. Many people, when they become older, especially when they've gone through many things, there's this famous sikha from the Rebbe, that Avram Zokim Baba Yomim, that they take their difficult experiences from their past, the various losses, and they carry it with them. Baba Yomim, they carry around, and you can see on their face. The Rebbe said even a Ben Chamish Lemikra knows that he can look at a person and see, is he older than he looks, or is he younger than he looks? Because if the person is reliving the difficult experiences of his life, that it takes a toll. It takes a toll on the person. And when you see, especially, maybe it's my imagination, but it was like, as Rav Weiss or Rav Bezdin mentioned previously, the more upon him, he was so accepting and so appreciative of everything, of every moment of life, of anytime anybody did anything for him. It was almost, in the last years, it was always obsessed, at least when I saw him, it's such a simcha, whenever I spoke to him, such a simcha and such a sense of gratitude and such a sense of appreciation. And that, together with another lesson, I think, which we could take from him, is the sensitivity to another person. We just still in the parsha of Yosef, all the parshas together. So a famous incident when Yosef was in prison, and he tells the ones that his fellow inmates, "Why are you looking so downfallen?" What chapelle, the person's in prison. I mean, why is he so downfallen? Why are you looking like that? But the sensitivity that there was something going on, and he asked, and as a result of that, he interpreted his dream. And this is the way he got out of prison and became Mishnah Lamelech, and so on, as the whole story is brought in Chumash. But it took that sensitivity from Yosef HaTzadik to tune in and see that there's something special going on. And Rabbi Feigelstock was always that. I hope I'm not making it so difficult to you. If it's not difficult, could you do this? Could you do that? And it was almost always to help somebody else. It wasn't something that he himself needed. He himself was helping somebody else, and he needed something in order to help that other person. So that tremendous sensitivity to the circumstance, the maimah, the matzav of a zulas, where the other person is at and what the other person needs, and taking that into account, and the tremendous sense of hakaras hatev and gratitude and thanks to the Rebbe and thanks to HaKadosh Baruch Hu for whatever we have, something that I think we can all integrate in our daily lives, ben odom l'chaveirei, and of course his tremendous ibergegebenkeit to all the yesedus of Yiddishkeit as it was evolved here in the Kehillah. In any case, the Rebbe once said that those that have passed away most recently, although it's much easier for them to come back, they still have the kesher with Olam Hazeh, to come back with Tchias HaMeson, and will be among the first to become L'Tchia We should be able to see it. Go and Gich and take it from Miyad. They should be together, and he can return and tell us more stories. It should be a Melitz Yeshiva for the entire Mishpacha and Klal Achsidim and Klal Yisrael.
Amen. Amen. Ashakayach Harav Bell. Shkayach. I mean, it's amazing when you look over Rabbi Feigelstock's life. In today's day, when someone has a career of 5 years, 7 years, you say, "Oh, wow, he lasted a long time." When you think of Rabbi Feigelstock, he was close to 70 years. He was in chinuch. I mean, 70 years he was in chinuch. He from the 50s through the 90s into the 2000s. I mean, it's an incredible legacy that he left. And now we are going to be turning over to one of the earlier Talmidim in the yeshiva, someone that was a ben bias in the Feigelstock's home and developed an incredibly close relationship to him. Rav Nishan Mangel is a renowned a scholar at Talmud Chacham, a speaker, and all over the world, known all over the world, and serves today as the Rav of Ksav Sefer in Brooklyn, New York. And we were honored to have Rabbi Mangel here with us. Rabbi Mangel, please take it away.
And I'm on.
You're on.
The Mechaber, the whole Mishnayos, is Rabbeinu HaKodesh, Rabbi Yehuda Nossi, as amongst all the Tanoim, that one Tan is called HaKodesh. Not the Rabbi Kiva, not Hillel, not even Shimon HaTzadik, the first of the Tanoim. Because Shimon HaTzadik, HaKodesh, is a much higher madrega. The only one is called HaKodesh is a Rabbi, just like Moshe Rabbeinu is called Rabbeinu. But Yehuda Nossi had this title, HaNossi, a Rabbi, and HaKodesh. And nevertheless, with such all the tremendous greatness and the miles of Rabbeinu HaKodesh, the Chazal tell us, the Gemara in Ksubis, just a few minutes, a few seconds before he passes away, he says, Lebonai ani tzorich. Before I stand by the Kisa Kovet, Hashem will ask me, was herzlich mit deinen Kinder? Lebonai ani tzorich, are they going the same way? What you expected of them? Are they the same Yerushalayim and Chassidim, just like you, the children of Rabbeinu HaKodesh? So he says he needs the schus, he's afraid to go up to the Bezdin Shemailo until he says, Lebona, let me see how my children are. Same thing we find in last week's Parsha. The whole debate and disputed discussion between Yehuda and Yosef concerning Binyamin. And Yosef doesn't want to give back Binyamin to go back to his father. Yehuda approaches him and confronts him, and he tells him, Eich ele al ovi, vanar eneni iti. So Rabbi say, this is a much deeper pshat. Before him say, doesn't mean on kepshute, Yehuda and Binyamin and Yosef. It says to Klal Yisrael, to everybody. Eich ele al ovi sheba shemayim. The time comes to have an aliyas and a shem, a person should leave this world, and will stand before the Kisa Kovet. My children enmity are not in the same path, the same way as I. Rabbi said the biggest dachas is for a Yid who says, but Kisa Kovet, when David says, was tut sich mit deinen Kinder, when you say, Re gedulim shegedalti. In this week's Parsha, when Yankov was about to pass away, Yosef heard this, brought his two children. The Yankov should bench his children. Eventually, what is the Posik says, it is the Chitas from tomorrow. My Vorech as Yankov is going to bless Menashe and Ephraim, but let's see what the Posik says. But Vorech as Yosef, he benches Yosef. Yosef came in, he should bench his children. And the Posik says, Yosef, Yavorech as Yosef. And eventually, what did he say? Eventually, take benches, take the children. So why did the Posik say, Yavorech as Yosef, if he ultimately benched the children? So the Zohar Kodesh and Rashban and other Mefarshim also have been explained. Birchas Bonim is Birchas Av. There cannot be a bigger blessing, a bigger bracha, a bigger nachas. Birchas Bonim is Birchas Av. The Friedrich Rebbe said that this I heard from Rabbi Gringlas. As all of you know, who know Rabbi Feigelstock, his best friend in Montreal was Rabbi Gringlas. Rabbi Gringlas' best friend was Rabbi Feigelstock. That mamish like Achim, to me, twins. I lived by Rabbi Gringlas. I ate by Rabbi Feigelstock. But anyways, they were the two closest friends that you can imagine. So I heard from Rabbi Gringlas. It's not known, it's not in Asiche, that he heard in Atwatsk for the Friedrich Rebbe, Nachas. What does Nachas mean? Emestige, joy, delight from children. So Friedrich Rebbe says Nachas means Ninim, Chsidim, Tmimim. If you have children who are Chsidim, Tmimim, so this is the biggest Nachas. Our Rebbe added to it also Shluchim. Rabbi Feigelstock, Zera Bercha Hashem. Hadevishter blessed him. All his children are Chsidim, Tmimim, Shluchim, Rabbonim. Emesdike Berach, Zera Berach Hashem. They proudly stand by Kisa Kovet and start the Evishter, Regidulim Shegedalt together with my wife. As mentioned before, Rabbi Heschel, we called him Hashi. He also comes from Czechoslovakia, Hashi. Herschel Feigelstock. Isha Chesed. I ate by him for 10 years. I learned in Montreal from Tovshir Yud Aleph till Tovshir Chof Aleph, 1951 to 1961. Almost the entire 10 years, I ate by Rabbi Feigelstock. Usually a bocher stays for a little while, 2-3 years, changes where he eats. And I was also invited with many people. I should come to Shabbos and Yom Tov. But the hospitality, Achnosos Orchim, was such, I felt mamish at home. I didn't want to change, and I stayed by there for 10 years. I ate every Shabbos, every Yom Tov. But this is already mentioned before also. He has Achnosos Orchim, always with guests. But let me tell you something which is so unique, which still is before my eyes. One year as a bocher in Montreal, I felt very sick, a sore throat, a flu with very high fever. I never stayed in a dormitory. I always had my private room. And I'm very choshev, I mentioned before, I'm very choshev, a person where I stayed, where I lived. And I was there I was sick being at home. The Bacharim brought me breakfast, they brought me lunch, with me supper. When I needed medication, they brought it. But suddenly, like the second or third day, they have the high fever and tremendously painful, a sore throat. I hear a knock on my door. I say, come in. Who is there? Hashi Friedman. Friedman is also Feigelstock. And he says, listen, how are you? So I tell him, Baruch Hashem. Hashem, I hope I have our full shlema. He says, listen, I want to put on your clothes, and I want you to come over to my house. I, my wife, want to take care of you. So him, Reb Herschel, I'm here in a good Christian house. The Bachrim bring me everything what I need. So why should I go to, why should I bother you? A principal a whole day. His wife was also working. He says, no. And he took immediately, near my bed was the chair with my clothes. He immediately takes up my pants and my jacket, said, listen, get dressed and come to my home. The boy said, I went to his home. You just can imagine every half an hour, did a cup of tea, did this and this and that. It was there for 10 days. This is the middle of Avram Avinu. Vita Eshel. Avram was outstanding Achnosos Orchim, but not only feeding and giving him drink, but Vita Eshel is Achille, Shtia. Yes, Bochim came to him, ate Shabbos and Yom Tov. But Lina, He took me from my house where I was living to his house, gave me a beautiful room and such a hospitality, such a chnosas, unbelievable. This is the ebbesdike the midday from Avram Avinu. Now I also mentioned the Ish Sholem. What is Ish Sholem? Usually we make a siyum on Mishnayos, and the last mission and last word is even from Sholem. Herschel Feigelstock was ebbesdike Ish Sholem. As mentioned before, a principal for 40 years. As you know, so many different malamdim. Everybody has their own day. Everybody's a chaverap. Everybody's equal. So maybe a controversy with this malamed and this malamed. How about malamdim with the hanholer? Afterwards, parents with the teachers and my parents with hanholer. Always a kachla for machlekes. I never heard for, and as I said, I stayed by for 10 years, and I knew him very closely. I never heard a loud word, it's a degrading word. Only made sholem between the malamdim, made sholem between the parents and the malamdim, made sholem between the hanholen and malamdim, and so on. But everybody knows once he couldn't make sholem. This is already is known. So Mele, since he was Ish Sholem, he decided he's going to resign. He cannot have a machlekes, he's Ish Sholem, he's going to resign. But before he's going to resign, he decides he's going to ask the Rebbe. So he went to the Rebbe. This everybody knows, but the Rebbe told him, as I never heard something more ridiculous, that you should resign, you should be not that principal. And the Rebbe told him, give a broche, and he worked out at the big machlekes. But the Rebbe said, I'm going to tell you a maaseh, which I don't think anybody knows, and I'm Pacific, but his own children know it. There was a melamed in the yeshiva, especially a very good melamed, an outstanding melamed, a mechanech. But as far as discipline is concerned, he had to have always his own ways. If Dan Hall decided, for example, that Hanukkah should start Wednesday, the Hanukkah vacation, he decided it has to start Tuesday. And he dismissed the children, never mind what the Hadolah says. If Dan Hall decided Friday, summer, the yeshiva should close 1 o'clock, he decided the yeshiva should close 12 o'clock. And Herschel Feigelstock pleaded with him, it cannot go like this. It cannot be such a matter that the person should do whatever he wants. But it didn't work. So he called together then a whole from the Yeshiva in Montreal. He says, what should we do? I did everything possible to change this person should also listen. And it doesn't do. So there's a meeting in the Yeshiva, and then Hall decided this exceptionally good mechanech, but since he doesn't follow the dictates of the Hall, should be released, should be fired. This was the decision of the Hall. Rabbi Feigelstock, Ish Sholem, decided he will not fire him unless he will discuss this with the Rebbe. He went to the Rebbe and said to the Rebbe the ganze Meise. He did everything possible. He's a good Rebbe, a good Melamed. But how can the Yeshiva run if everybody will do, if one person does it, then should somebody else will copy. So he said to the Rebbe, and then Hole met. The Hole decided he should be fired. So the Rebbe said to Rabbi Feigelstock, don't fire him as yet. He'll come up to Yechidus, and I'll speak with him. I'll deal with him. This person came up to Yechidus eventually, Weiss and the Rebbe spoke with him about this problem. So he said to the Rebbe, that's what I am. I cannot change. I cannot change. I teach the children good, but this is my personality. This is my dose. I cannot change. So the Rebbe said to him, you were in the army. He was in the Russian army, this Melamed. He says, you're in the army. Can every soldier do whatever he wants? Or he has to listen to the general or to the corporal, to the officers? So the Rebbe, she said, the Rebbe, what can I do? I cannot change. So the Rebbe told him, do it for me. Can you imagine what the Rebbe said? Do it for me, because I ask you. Not to be a machlekes in the yeshiva. So the Rebbe, he says to the Rebbe, Rebbe, if you ask me I should jump off the Eiffel Tower, I'll do it. If you ask me I should jump up of the Eiffel Tower, I cannot do it if you ask me. Do you know what the Rebbe answered him? The Rebbe says, you can jump up also to the Eiffel Tower. Weiss said this in Merumas, in Chumash, with Kolev, Olelale. Yes. Anyways, let me just, believe me, this is the tip of the iceberg, but let me just finish. Shlocha Pratis this week is in Parshas Vaychi. Vaychi is also a contradiction. Vaychi lived and he passed away. So the Chazal tell us Mazar b'chaim, Avhu b'chaim. The same thing also. Rabbi Hashi, I called him Hashi, obviously. Hashi Feigelstock. You lived for, you had Arichas Yom Shalom Toivis, not only Begashim, what's Baruchnius, but you lived for Tzadik Ches Shono 98 years. What's 98 Begematria? Begematria L'chaim. You are going to L'chaim Toivim L'sholem.
Amen. Amen.
So Mele, whatever I spoke is so many more materials, but the tip of the iceberg.
Yes.
I think there are many other speakers. So let me just finish off.
Yes.
We have made Yosher.
Amen.
Amen. Gula Hashlema, the court of Mamish.
Amen.
Finish Mamish, as you know, the Teves of Mamish. With the Teves of Mamish.
For the Herzike Werter, incredible. Thank you so much. As Rabbi Mengel and other speakers spoke about Rugedulim Shagidalnu and what Montreal and the Rabbi Feigelstock and Hollow were able to put together, Rabbi Shmuel Lu was one of those products. He went on from Montreal as a Ben Bayis by the Feigelstock home, who they could, you could, like the Montreal phone book, you could put into the Ben Bayis. Everybody was a Ben Bayis. But Rabbi Shmuel Lu went on to an illustrious career, even till today. Went to London and instead was a principal there. He was so inspired by Rabbi Feigelstock and saw what a principal could accomplish. He went on to become one of the world-renowned mechanchim in Great Britain. So we have the honor of Rabbi Shmuel Lu. Unfortunately, he is traveling at this time. So he was kind enough to give us a video, and I'm going to ask Reb Mendel Feigelstock to please play the video of Rabbi Shmuel Lu at this time. Thank you.
The Shloshim of Rabbi Reuven, Tzvi, Yehuda, Zichron Levrocha, I would like to share the general opinion that I absorbed as a young boy, and over the years it became solidified within me, of a chassid. I came to Montreal 63 years ago. That's when I met him. And what I saw as a young boy, before his 18th birthday, was an Oved Elokim, first and foremost. A chassid, a tremendously dedicated chassid of the Rebbe. And both of those really one function, serving the Eibishter in the way that the Rebbe wants and with his kashas to the Rebbe, but it was done with an incredible panimis dike simcha. Serious, but with simcha. And that's something that one could feel. I remember times I visited Rabbi Koppelbacher. He lived in the house. I think it was on Waverly. And I remember going there one evening and saw the whole atmosphere in the home and all of his children, all everything that he did with simcha. He was a mechanech, ba'poyel. And in order to be a mechanech, there's a requirement to find the exact match between chesed and gevura, between inspiration and discipline. and a direction to a person. And one can sense that he was always trying to do that, and always in that type of a way. Sometimes I spoke with him. I was there 4 years in Montreal. I was going to his office upstairs, 5265 Park Avenue, and he would explain to me certain things that were happening in the school and how he dealt with it. And I was impressed because there were challenges, and whichever way you're going to do it, it's going to be whatever. But he was there with that same Yerushalayim, his kashrus, and simcha. Ben Odom Lachaveiroi. It extended to his relationship. He was a chava. It was in Tovshin Yud Ches, I'm almost sure. Maybe Yotes. That's 63 or maybe 62 years ago. Probably 63. And I was at his house. I probably went there to visit a couple. And he showed me a page of a Ksaviat Kodesh of the Frierdiker Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak, which was written in the Tovshins in the 1940s, when the Rebbe was very weak, and I heard that he told me he had a pencil, which was a couple of, maybe an inch or two, because he didn't have the strength to hold it. And this was a sikha written by Frierdiker Rebbe without lifting the pencil from the table, from the paper. And it was prepared for print by the Rebbe. And the Rebbe, in pen, sometimes had to make it clear where the break of words was, and certain letters, how to make it clearer. And I was inspired. I said, "Where did you get this?" And he said that there were two chaverim, he and Reb Wolf, Rabbi Greenglass, as we knew him, Rabbi Wolf Greenglass. And one of them, I think it was Rabbi Greenglass. To my story, it's not relevant which one it was. I think it was Rabbi Greenglass sent something to the Rebbe of the Frierdiker Rebbe, and the Rebbe gave him as a gift just a boigen, like a folded over page, which was 4 sides, but with a folded over like a exercise book, like a writing book, composition book of whatever. And he ripped it in half and shared it, I think, with Rabbi Ferguson. And that made an indelible impression upon my mind of what it means being a chava, being a friend. And being a friend means it takes two. This was the relationship. This is the type of an Odom Lachaveiroi that you saw in this person. He was maybe not so well known today, but I know he was a person who advised and taught young couples who are going to be married or who were recently married. I even had one short conversation with him in Tovshin Chav Gimel, when I was years already in 770. Mechanech Bapoyel. But the biggest thing that I saw, and that's what I want to really share with you, is that 2 years ago, it was the 90th wedding anniversary of the Rebbe and the Rebbetzin. And my teacher and my shpia and very dear, close Yedid, Rabbi Beryl Mochkin, invited me. I was already in America. It was my sister's first yahrzeit, and I had to be in Minnesota. Whatever it was, the timing, the placing, he asked me to come and speak. And they made, in Montreal, they made like a big chasana. There were tables with music and dancing. It was like a wedding, and hundreds of people were there. And I was asked to come and speak. And only because it was Rabbi Beryl Mochkin, I couldn't say no to him. And I went because it meant leaving early, at 5 o'clock in the morning. The logistics were difficult. And at that occasion, I spoke. I was one of the later speakers, but at an earlier stage, Rabbi Feigelstock spoke. This is 2 years ago. He was 96 years old. Somebody might have thought he's fragile, his mind. He got up there, and he spoke, and read from lovingly kept letters that he had from the Rebbe, and each one wrapped in plastic, to illustrate, and told stories about his relationship with the Rebbe in the time of the Frierdiker Rebbe, in the time of him. And he just ended his speech and he said, "I love you, Rebbe." And from that moment that he finished that speech till this minute, I wonder why they needed me to be a guest speaker. because nothing could match it, what he said. And then I realized why the Eibishter wanted that I should be there. The excuse was guest speaker. I was there to be able to see a dugma chaya, a living example of every quality which I told you. You could feel it coming out of every sentence that he said. A Yerei Shemayim, an Ovid Elakim, a chosid of the Rebbe, a true chava, sensitive to other people, but somebody who, despite everything, all the situations, was besimcha. So the Rebbe to helfen that we, Chayiten Aliboy, certainly his family and those who knew him and everyone who heard about him, to learn from these qualities in our own lives, to serve Hashem and to be good mukusharim mitoch simcha, and through that we will bring about the Hezgalos of Mashiach Tzidkeinu, when we'll see the truest and ultimate simcha, what all of the whole world is here for, and may it happen b'korev mamash now.
Rebbetzin Miriam Swerdlov, while she was in Montreal, helped Rabbi and Rebbetzin Feigelstock in establishing early programs, early Chabad programs, became very, very close to them. Rebbetzin Swerdlov doesn't need my introduction. She's well known as a speaker, a lecturer, herself a tremendous educator. So at this time, ladies and gentlemen, it's my great honor to present Rebbetzin Miriam Swerdlov. But because she's such a shy person and so soft-spoken, I want to ask everyone to please be quiet, because I want to bring her out, and she's shy. So Rebbetzin Swerdlov, if you don't mind, please.
I'm being shy.
Ah, okay.
And by the way, and I think that you should know that in general, none of us are Rebbetzins. We only have two Rebbetzins, Rebbetzin Mosia, Chayamushka, and Rebbetzin Chana. The rest of us are not Rebbetzins, so please don't. Unless you have to introduce someone as Rebbetzin for political reasons, because she's the Rebbetzin of a Chabad house, then you have to for her honor. Otherwise, please not. Thank you.
I should have known. I should have known this was coming. Okay.
I personally feel really funny to follow the people that I'm following. My memories are totally different. I met Rabbi and Rebbetzin and Mrs. Feigelstock in 1954. Pesach Tovshin Yud Daled. I was 9 years old and I came to Montreal. They changed our lives. They were our role models, the little girls. First of all, they were magnificently beautiful. They were beautiful people. The covet that Rabbi and Mrs. Feigelstock had to each other, the Übergegebenkeit that Rabbi Feigelstock showed to his wife, and the way she looked at him, it was for us little girls, this was the epitome of what life has to be like. Some people lead by meach. Some people lead by keach. And some people lead by who they are. Rabbi and Mrs. Feigelstock led by who they are. They were the first shluchim. The word shluchim, we didn't know then. But they were the first shluchim, though the term wasn't coined yet. I remember when they went to New York, one of the greatest things they can do for us, they brought back Weiss potato chips because they knew that that would be the best present in the whole world. They were the leaders of the young community. They started Mesiba Shabbos. We were little girls. I was maybe 10, 11. Me, Mindy Gerlitsky Shemtov, and Iki Gerlitsky Eisenbach, who today lives in Montreal, would go to Clark Street, the apartment way up, wooden stairs, on Thursday night, and we would pop popcorn for Mesiba Shabbos. And there was always other people there. People that came from Russia, people that came from everywhere. There was a lot of little kids, Baruch Hashem, and it was Erev Shabbos. You never heard a loud voice. And I have to tell you something very moving to me. For years, we popped popcorn. And then the most incredible miracle happened. My grandson, Mendel Friedman, the son of my son-in-law Yehuda and Yudi Friedman, Shloshim in Mill Basin, married Rabbi Feigelstock's granddaughter, Chaya. They are today Shloshim in Tampa. And for their vart, open your hearts. To me, this was, wow. For their vart, Rabbi Feigelstock remembered the popcorn of 1954 and 55 and 56. And he sent a big bag of popcorn for the l'chaim that was held in our house. You know, I was so excited about that popcorn. I didn't want to share it with anyone. It was like holy popcorn. But it showed that he remembered and that she remembered what we did, our connection. They lived in a small apartment, but whenever we came, we felt part of it. Never, never a loud voice, never, never a loud word. And I have to tell you, they moved to Waverly on a Thursday, I think, Thursday morning. And there was a Farbrengen there on Shabbos, because that's who they were. Rabbi Feigelstock's kindness, Rabbi Feigelstock's caring, Rabbi Feigelstock's demeanor, his smile lit up his face and our lives. I'm so proud to say that, what did you say before? Nachas, ninim, chsidim, tmimim. Him and I share our great-grandchildren. Thank you, Rebbe, for sending us a man like Rabbi Feigelstock and Mrs. Feigelstock. I'm so proud to have been a little bit of a small little part in what they were to the city of Montreal. Bevirchas Mashiach now, seid gesund.
Oh yeah. Thank you for that perspective, Mrs. Swerdloff. And you have a lot of nachas from your children, your grandchildren, and your great-grandchildren.
Baruch Hashem.
To every great accomplishment, Rabbi Feigelstock had to eventually had to give up day-to-day running the yeshiva. I mean, he was already probably in the 70s, I believe, at the time. But it comes a time when, to deal with all the children and kids and the lamdim, as we heard from before, he had to give it up. So who can stand in his place? I mean, this was the principle for so many years, but they came up with a brilliant successor. Rabbi Yossi Schmutz, I believe, came in right after Rabbi Ferguson. Maybe there was someone else, but I think early on he came in. Besides that, Rabbi Schmutz's father was a Malamed in the yeshiva and a very close friend, to Rabbi Feigelstock. Rabbi Yossi Schmutz worked hand in hand with Rabbi Feigelstock. He never left and Holler Rabbi until the last day. He was still part of the Holler of the yeshiva and gave eitzes and gave his deya. But now we have with us Rabbi Yossi Schmutz to please share some of his recollections and his connection to Rabbi Feigelstock. Rabbi Yossi, you're on.
Thank you very much. Do you hear me?
Oh, we hear you loud and clear.
Okay. Thank you very much for having me join, giving me the opportunity. It's a true schus to be a part of this call, especially when growing up, even before I came to yeshiva, I knew about Rabbi Feigelstock and Mrs. Feigelstock. Our families were very, very close. My father, Olav Sholom's good friend, even though he was a little older than Rabbi Feigelstock, this friendship goes back since the 1920s in Wien, whether the Shiv Shul are just as good friends at that time. But for me personally, today is a tremendous opportunity to give back. Just 3 weeks before Rabbi Feigelstock's passing, I called Rabbi Feigelstock in Vancouver and I asked him a favor. We were always in touch. We had a lot still in common that we were working with, even though I myself, I'm not in the yeshiva for the last 10 years. but we have a shaykhus. And I asked Rabbi Feigelstock if he'd be so kind. We were celebrating, it was Tez Zayin Mar Cheshvan. We were celebrating the 101st birthday of my father. And I asked Rabbi Feigelstock if he would join on Zoom to talk. You know, we're very close. My brothers, my sisters, they all know the Feigelstocks. We all know Rabbi Feigelstocks. And he readily agreed. And we were zeicha for 45 minutes. Rabbi Feigelstock was on Zoom. And thank you to his children and grandchildren. They prepared everything for him. And he spoke about the history, and once again, with such clarity, such warmth. It was amazing. We didn't know at the time, this was 3 weeks before, but it was done in the warmth and the kindness of his heart. And for that, we're grateful. And therefore, I feel this is an opportunity to give back whatever I'll remember. First and foremost, what has been mentioned many times over and over and over was the fact that Rabbi Feigelstock was a chassid. I mean, anyone that had a shaykhus with Rabbi Feigelstock felt it, heard it, saw it, he lived it. And it's easy to say the word chassid, this person's a chassid, but he paid for it. I can tell you clearly that many decisions that he has taken, decisions that the Anhola has taken with his guidance was very, and at times was very costly. But as earlier as Rabbi Bell had mentioned, it was guided by two things. And these were Rabbi Feigelstock saying, first of all, what do you think? Would the Rebbe appreciate this way or that way? And it was always whatever we felt that the Rebbe would be happy with, that directed his decision. Number two was the fact, is this a kovet for Lubavitch? So the decisions that had to be made, whether it was regarding Yeshiva, Tzvi Agudas Chabad, that he was not only a member, but he was one of the core founders, and Gan Yisrael, or was it a decision that had to be made regarding the Beis HaChaim that he was involved to the last moment? Just 2 weeks before his passing, I spoke to him regarding the Beis HaChaim. Everything was guided by these two questions. Would the Rebbe would be happy with his decision or not? Is this a kovet to Lubavitch? And to me, it was very, very interesting because prior to the Rebbe's Nesius, that we know Yud Shvat, Tovshin Yud Aleph, Anash from Montreal, and Rabbi Feigelstock amongst everyone, had a critical part to play for the Rebbe's Nesius. And prior to the Rebbe's Nesius, Rabbi Feigelstock enjoyed a very close kesher with the Rebbe, called the Ramash at the time. And it was more like an older brother. Some of the Rabbi Feigelstock would talk and discuss things. And it was interesting how he used to tell stories from before the Nesius. But once the Rebbe became Nasi, the relationship was pure, a chassid to a Rebbe. Just to give you an insight of one story that happened between Rabbi Feigelstock and the Rebbe before the Nesius, Rabbi Feigelstock would always tell the story and chuckle. There was a shidduch that someone read for Rabbi Feigelstock. At the time, he was in Montreal, he was a bocher, and of course, it went at that time through the Frierdiker Rebbe. And he traveled to New York, and he went out with this individual, and things didn't work out. So he was standing in 770, and while he's there, just walking around, he met up with the Rebbe. So the Rebbe asks Rabbi Feigelstock, this is the Ramash, the Rebbe before the Nesius, asks Rabbi Feigelstock, what happened with that Hatzah? What happened with that offer? So Rabbi Feigelstock says, it didn't work out. Then he smiled. Rabbi Feigelstock smiled and said, but I took the guts and I asked the Rebbe in a friendly, respectful way, but from wanneer weist ihr? How do you know about it? He went through the Frierdiker Rebbe. So the Rebbe smiled and said to Rabbi Feigelstock, in the Gesetzen habe ich es nicht gelegt, which means in the newspapers, I didn't read it. There was a friendly shaykhs that they had. Rabbi Feigelstock told the story, as Rabbi Lewitt mentioned, how he was invited up. The Rebbe snuck him in. It's interesting, as much as that yachas was there, after the Nesius, there was a tremendous bittul. Just think alone of the Yechidus. He traveled, Rabbi Feigelstock traveled to Yechidus to try to relieve himself from the shlichus. And the Rebbe sent him back. He went happily back, knowing this is what is destined for him, and that is what he accepted. Another thing that I want to mention is Rabbi Feigelstock, as working together side by side, and watching Rabbi Feigelstock as a mechanech par excellence, a principal, someone that cared for each and every one of the children. He wasn't just a principal for the school or for a class or classes. Each and every one of the children meant a world for him. And that is the way he decided and made decisions based on individual. I was wondering always what drove him to these special qualities and understanding, and he never answered it. But I will tell you one story that he used to say from time to time. And we know Rabbi Feigelstock wasn't a very emotional person. But there was one story that when he would tell the story, he would become emotional. And this is the story that he used to say, and we knew it was like the Rebbe had a story that we knew by a Fabrengen. When the Rebbe told the story when the Frierdiker Rebbe was in Eretz Yisrael, and the Chassid in Eretz Yisrael walked into Yechidus, and he saw the Rebbe Marash, every time the Rebbe told the story, the Rebbe became emotional. Rabbi Feigelstock's story was that there was in the early years in Yeshiva, there was a bacher that according to all accounts, this bacher had to be let go. He had to leave. There's a klal, the Rebbe writes it many times, and the answers from the Rebbe, there's a yochid and a rabbim. You have to look out for the rabbim on the account of the yochid. And this bacher, it was a given that he's gone. He's going and he'll be gone very soon. However, in order to make this happen, they needed an holy meeting. It should be officially, brought to an holy meeting and decided in public, not just, the teacher, the principal, and so on. So they had an holy meeting, again, which everyone took for granted that this bocherel is going. At the head of the table, there was in the early years in Montreal, an elder chassid, his name was Rabbi Chmiel ben Yomesen. The grandfather of Rabbi Chmiel ben Yomesen was ein gesund und stark. He was an older person, a Rov, noch from the Heim, the Alte Heim. And he was sitting bereish HaShulchan. And every member of the Anhola, without any exception, gave a reason for this bacher to be dismissed. After everyone had a chance to say and give their opinion, the last word, Rabbi Ben Yomesen had the last word. So everyone finished. They turned to Rabbi Ben Yomesen, what he will say. And Rabbi Ben Yomesen said he has one question to ask. Is there anyone around the table here of the Anhola that said a kapitel tilim mitrern, not just a kapitel tilim, that cared enough and some tears dropped out of their eyes and gave tzedakah for this bacher? And the answer was clear no. Oy bazoi soll bleiben. If that's the case, concluded Rabbi Ben Yomesen, let this bacher remain. And Rabbi Feigelstock ends the story after he got back his composure. And this bacher today is a great-great-grandfather of a beautiful, beautiful family. With that story, I believe, had a lot to do with how Rabbi Feigelstock would decide each and every bacher, every child's fate. And interesting, even though Rabbi Feigelstock was in Chinuch, as we said, 60 years, he always was ready to hear new methods, I remember distinctly coming back from his children, and he was so fond of all his children. And when he was in different places, whether it was in South Africa, whether it was in Pittsburgh, whether it was, by his son in Vancouver, wherever he went, he always had the opportunity. I guess they introduced him to the chinuch, to the meisid. He always came back with new insight, new ideas, and he always was sharing. Sai the nachas that he has from his children all over the globe. And Baruch Hashem, he felt kontoiti mikol hachasodim, that the Eibusha gave him such a schus to have such wonderful children. And he understood and appreciated each and every one of his children. Many times, the best thing that happened in Montreal is that Rabbi Feigelstock did not have license to drive a car. That gave us an opportunity to give him rides, to hear stories, and it was amazing. Another thing I want to add, I'll be very short, and that is that Rabbi Feigelstock, not in public, but in private, was very, very, very proud of his yichus. He didn't publicize it. People don't know about it. But Rabbi Feigelstock comes from the mishpacha, through his mother, from the Chassam Sofer. And after I got married, my wife, my shviger, is also from the same family. Rabbi Feigelstock would constantly, one day he asks me for all my name, my family, my shviger, their family, all the kids. And he gave me the whole yichus from the Chassam Sofer all the way down to our children, and said, this is a tremendous schus, but it's a achrayus. He says, Yossi, be careful. When new svarim were printed from the Chassam Sofer, he came to me with, it was around 15 years ago or 20 years ago, they reprinted all the svarim. He would be so proud. He would tell me, do you know that the Chassam Sofer had a Gilei Eliyahu, B'hokitz v'chulu, and everyone that came in his Daled Amis, as it was said earlier, and I'm sure will be continued to be said, was touched by a person as he's aging, becomes more and more happier and outgoing and able to relate to everyone. Yehi Zichar Baruch, and we should try our very best, the mishpach and everyone, all of us, to go in his ways, emulate all his, as example for all of us. We should be zeicher to Mashiach now.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Reb Yossi. Thank you so much for those kind words. Hartzike Werter. Rabbi Moshe Nu came to Montreal and established a major institution, world-renowned, the Montreal Torah Center. He worked very closely, and as everyone here was a close friend with Rabbi Feigelstock. Who wasn't a close friend of Rabbi Feigelstock? Everybody loved Rabbi Feigelstock. So we would like to introduce Rabbi Moshe Nu here to say a few words, but Moshe Nu is traveling. So we're going to have to suffice with having a video of Rabbi Nu. So Reb Mendel, if you don't mind, let's play that video now. There he is.
A personal connection with Rabbi Feigelstock, Olav Shalom, was in as much that I was on the board for a little period of the Yeshiva. And it was always inspiring to see that Rabbi Ferguson attended every meeting, even though he had long retired, and how much the Yeshiva and the Talmidim, when they gave to him benefesh, decades after his retirement. I asked my mother-in-law, Mrs. Treitel, to share something of her impressions, a spontaneous reaction to telling her that I would be sharing a few words in honor of Rabbi Feigelstock. So this is what she said, I thought I would share with you. I'm sure it's going to be mentioned that he was the first director of Gan Yisrael in a place called Lantier. So she remembers an incident that illustrates how concerned he was about the boys. They had brought cases of plums to camp, and he was concerned that the children shouldn't overeat and hurt their stomachs and get a stomachache. This was a big concern that made, of course, a great impression on my mother-in-law. She says, and I know this, he was a very good listener. That's a huge talent. He was honorable of his siblings and didn't forget his family after becoming a Lubavitcher. And in that sense, he was very respectful of everyone. He never called his contemporary Rabbanim by their first name, even though they were younger. He treated everybody with incredible success. And he was, as I'm sure everybody is saying, Pnimis Diker, Chosid, Emes Yireh Shemayim, Übergeben zum Leben, and just an inspiration to observe him and his, as he went about his simple affairs.
Our next speaker is not only a dear friend of mine, he's a colleague here, Shliach in California. We went to school together in Montreal. I'm not sure exactly how many years he lived in Montreal, but I don't think it was for very long. But that short period of time made a tremendous, tremendous impact on his life. And his relationship with Rabbi Feigelstock was very, very unique, very unique. And is with great honor and pleasure. I hardly speak to the guy ever. I never, we live. But before I let Rabbi Eliezer speak, I have to ask him a question. Rabbi Eliezer, when we were in 4th grade and we heard all the people talking about Rabbi Feigelstock like this, what would be our reaction? A kind man, a loving man.
For me, he was only
man.
kind and compassionate.
When we were in
Abba, I don't know what happened with you.
The only thing we knew about Rabbi Feigelstock was come to my office, and that meant that he wasn't going to wish you a happy birthday.
Yeah, but when he brought me to the office, it was a different experience than when he brought you to the office.
I'm sure. So, you were an angel. You were just an angel. I remember you in 4th grade. You were no angel.
No angel, but
semi. Anyways, I don't want to get into it. Rabbi Eliezer, you're up next. But to you, I'm not so deferential. To the other ones, I want to be deferential. But to you, make it quick. It's 1:25.
I've been waiting for so long.
Rabbi Yossi like soon has to go here, Korea. Okay?
Yeah.
So in Argentina. So go ahead.
But I come with a little interesting perspective. The Gemara tells us, Kol Malamadis Ben Chaveru Torah. It's like he gave birth to the person. In a certain sense, I feel that Rabbi Feigelstock gave birth to me because he treated me, he was Malamed Torah to me, and he treated me not just like a student, but like a child and like a son. And I really feel that is indicative of his quality and approach to education. You have teachers that come and they teach and they plug the time slot, they go home. And you have people, teachers and educators and melamdim, mechanechim, that take the student under their wing and they treat them with a sense of love and care, which is remarkable. And I want to share with you 2 different incidents that are separated by 55 years. One in 1965 and one just last February in Shvat in 2020. In 1965, I was a 14-year-old kid. And my family had moved from Los Angeles. I went to a more modern day school in Los Angeles, and suddenly the Babbage Yeshiva was 200 yards down the street. We ended up living on the same block, and I ended up in the yeshiva. And Yud Shvat, which was February 11th, 1965, I go to the Rebbe for the first time. I'm a 14-year-old kid, and he takes me. Not only does he take me to stay in his in-laws' house, and I'll never forget that Friday night. It was Yud Shvat. They had just expanded out the shul somewhat. And the Rebbe was davening Ma'ariv because it was Yud Shvat. And I'm standing there on a bleacher together with Rabbi Feigelstock. And he's explaining to me this and explaining to me that with a sense of care. He could have left me to the hands of the Bakram that also came on the same bus. But what he did was he treated each one of his students, and this is what I felt in particular, with a sense of love and a sense of care and a sense of interest that was really remarkable. And in the end turned out to be transformational in your life, because that short interlude that I lived in Montreal for 2 or 3 years turned out to be the turning point in my life. And one of the primary personalities that caused me to end up where I am today was the fact that Rabbi Feigelstock did take me to the Rebbe that Yud Shvat and did take us into Yechidus. There was a Yechidus Klali Prati where the Rebbe met with the students that came from the Mesivta in Montreal. It was that kind of transformational moment that made him so special. And fast forward to 2020, I was in New York in February doing research for a new book, a biography of the Frierdiker Rebbe, and looking to speak to people who had some kind of experiences. And I heard that he was in town. So I got through his family. I found out where he was staying. We sat down to talk. We had a whole interview. And he told me with a sense of freshness, like it happened yesterday, about his interactions with the Frierdiker Rebbe, in particular when it came in reference to his shidduch. But what was so remarkable and what I sensed, even though there had been 55 years since I stood together with him as a teenager in 770, looking down to below to see the Rebbe leading being the Baal Tefillah, that there was no sense, here he was 97 years old. There was no sense of change in the way he related to me as a student. And there was no sense of the way it's, as the Gemara says, it's like Malamed Yolda, that he gives birth to him, he treated you like your own child. And that's what made him so remarkable and so special, that sense of interest. And here we stood, we had this long conversation, which thank God I recorded, and I shared it with members of the family. But that was so special about him. And I want to share with you just two other short things. 2 years ago, we had a long talk one day. And he told me that when my family moved to Israel in 1968, after the 6-Day War, I didn't even know about this. He wanted to make sure I would end up in Lubavitch Yeshiva. At that time, the Jewish agency, the Sachnut, was not paying tuition for kids who were coming to Israel, who were going to non-Zionist yeshivas. So he went to a friend of his who was a rabbi called St. Luke, who happened to have connections to the Jewish agency. And he was the one that arranged that the tuition should be paid for me and my sister, so we should go to the yeshiva in Beis Rivka in Kfar Chabad. This sense of responsibility and this sense of caring was what made him so very special. Some 10 years ago, I came to New York for Gimel Tammuz, and I went to daven Friday by Leil Gimel Tammuz to go daven in the Rebbe's room. And the place was packed with people. And I saw in the back of the room, he was trying to come in. So I pushed my way through the room and I grabbed him and I said, "Komm rein. You pulled me in here some 40, 45 years ago, and let me take you in." I pushed aside the crowd. I brought him to the front of the room to stand by the Rebbe's desk. He was a person who brought untold people to the Rebbe, untold people to Torah and mitzvahs, and he did it like he cared for his own children. And this kind of dedication as a mechanech is rare to find. And that he is the role model for all other mechanechim to teach in that kind of way, where he looks at his students not just as somebody separate from his life, like his own children.
Shkoyach. David, I know how hard it was to keep it down to this.
I couldn't do another half hour,
I know,
Abba,
but I really appreciate it.
I
really
don't want to steal
appreciate
your
it.
time, Abba. I know you got a long, between each speech, it's got to be a 3-hour speech.
We still have a few. We may even come back to Mrs. Swerdloff. Okay, anyways. The next speaker I'm not very familiar with. It says over here in the notes that he is the chief rabbi of Broward County in Florida. He has many meisters under him. He was a Talmud of Rabbi Feigelstock, it says over here, and his parents were very close to Rabbi and Mrs. Feigelstock. I'm not sure how to pronounce his name, whether it's Rabbi Raphael Tenenhaus or it's Rabbi Rafi Tenenhaus. Rabbi Tenenhaus, can you show yourself, please? We don't see you here. Can you please show yourself? Are you here? Rabbi Tenenhaus, did you pay your bill this month?
Yes, I did.
Oh, 1 second over here. Here's Rabbi Raphael Tenenhaus. And for those that don't know, I mean, they think that I'm serious, but myself and Rabbi Tenenhaus met when we were in kindergarten, and we went through literally our whole educational system together. And in Morristown, we got smicha together. We got married 3 days apart. The guy calls me in all the time. Could someone tell him to stop bothering me? That's the first thing. And Rabbi Tenenhaus, okay, Rafi, how would you like to be introduced? The Montreal of Broward County, please take it away.
Hi, Rabbi Perlmutter, and Chaim to the Feigelstock family, and to be an aliyah to the neshama of your father, my principal from grade 1 through grade 11, and we were grade 1, Rabbi Perlmutter and myself and many others, when the new yeshiva opened on Westbury. And I came back many times to Montreal, always spoke to Rabbi Feigelstock, and I was probably closest to Rabbi Feigelstock more than I was to his children, because I saw him more than I saw his children. So I say l'chaim, and I'll just share with you a few stories. On upon him, l'chaim.
On upon him.
First of all, as Rabbi Sputz mentioned, back in Vienna, my wife's family, the Felix, my Shver, Oliver Shalom, Rabbi Yosef Mordechai Felix, they knew the Feigelstock family, and a few weeks ago, 2 weeks before Rabbi Feigelstock passed away, My nephew, who's the shliach in the University of Miami, Rabbi Mendy Felig, called up Rabbi Feigelstock because he's doing research on my shver and the Felig family, and he spoke for 20 minutes to a half hour with Rabbi Feigelstock 2 weeks before he passed away. And it was a beautiful conversation. He was crystal clear, and he asked if he knew the Feligs in Vienna, and he said that they lived around the corner. I didn't know them that well, but my shver's mother, Itte, was a tzedekis. She was a young almana, and she brought up 3 children by herself. And he knew them, of course, not that well in Vienna, but later when they came to Canada, they, of course, were in the camps. These were the enemy alien camps where boys from Austria and Germany ended up in Canada as soon as they arrived for a number of years. They were in different camps. My shver was in 3 camps. My uncle, Joe Faust, he's 101 years old. Tzulange Yoren, he met Rabbi Feigelstock in London, and they learned together in the Schneider Yeshiva in London. A few years ago at my great niece's wedding, they met at a chuppah, and they were talking, Rabbi Feigelstock and my uncle, my mother's brother, and Tzulange Yoren, Tzulange Gesunte Yoren, and they discussed how they would go to Grzinski's bakery to pick up bread. The boys, the Bochum, were starving in Yeshiva, and together Rabbi Feigelstock and my uncle Joe Faust would schlep the bread and go on many buses to bring bread to the starving Bochum in London during the war. And then, of course, when the Tmimim, the 9 Shluchim of the Frierdiker Rebbe, came to Canada to start the yeshiva, my father, Oliver Shalom, and my Zayder, Rabbi Yisrael Tenenhaus, were there to greet the Bochum. And my grandparents, my father's parents, were able to leave Romania, Bukovina, Romania, before the war in 1938. My grandmother was Esther Dolphin, the oldest of 9 Dolphin children, who had already all settled in Canada starting in the 1920s. They were the last family to arrive from the Dolphin family. And my Zayde became very close to the Bochum, as did my father. So one story about Rabbi Feigelstock, and we all know how much he was Mahadir in mitzvahs. He had the most special lulav in town, and I'm sure he had the most special esrog, and his Pesach kitchen was a Pesach kitchen before Pesach kitchens were popular. And he would be the one who would line me up to go into Yechidus, Yud Shvat, and I was the shortest, so I always was able to stand right in front of the Rebbe. Many critical moments in my life, he was there for me when my father passed away, choosing where my father should be in the Beis HaChaim. And I have a picture behind me that's been in my house for many years. Rabbi Feigelstock made the kinyan at the Vort with my wife, Goldie. He's the one holding the handkerchief with my kala. And during many times that I had to sit shiva and shlo gedacht, Rabbi Feigelstock would learn Mishnayos between Mincha and Ma'ariv. So there were many times, critical times in my life that Rabbi Feigelstock was there. But a story that my father told me, and then I'll just tell one story of myself. My father told me that when his father passed away, it was a big shock because his father was a young man and his mother was the one who wasn't well. She had a stroke and she was in bed. And my Zayde on Chav Zayin Elul in 1948, so he went to shul, Chav Zayin Elul, he blew shofar, and he went home, ate breakfast, and he collapsed and he passed away. My father was already living in Bathurst, New Brunswick, where he lived for 20 years and where I was born. And he had to take the train from Bathurst, New Brunswick to Montreal, which was over 500 miles. And it was a big shock to him because he had a mother who wasn't well. Both my Zayde and my Baba were very close to the Tmimim, to the Bochum and the Yeshiva. And my father told me in these words, Hashel Feigelstock stayed with me the whole night. When I arrived, the whole night he stayed up with me because I was in a state of shock that it was my father who passed away so young. And this just always stayed in my heart. The Avos Yisrael, I'm sure he was very busy, Rabbi Feigelstock. The next day was Slichas early in the morning, but he stayed literally with my father the whole night because my father was in a state of shock that his father suddenly passed away. one story, and I believe later I will write a few stories. I do more writing than talking these days. And I will share one story of school because there's hundreds of stories. I'm not going to write hundreds of stories. I'll write, believe later, a few stories. But one story which taught me something with Rabbi Feigelstock, and it taught me something in my relationships with my family, with my children, with my grandchildren, with my colleagues, with my balabatim. And the story goes that we used to live on curbs in Montreal when the yeshiva moved to Westbury. So I had to go on the bus, the 160 bus. And one day it was snowing and it was slippery and I was a little bit late. And I start going down curbs and Bernard, and so I get to the bus stop and I miss the 160. Anyway, to make a story short, I come to the yeshiva, it's 9:30, I'm late. I take off my boots, as was customary, as you walk through the basement of the yeshiva, for those who remember the famous yeshiva basement. And sure enough, even though they didn't have cameras, but Rabbi Feigelstock caught me coming to school late. And he says to me, Zag Refoel, why are you late? So I said, oh, Rabbi Feigelstock, I was running for the bus. It was very slippery and I missed the 160, which goes on Barclay. And I ended up taking the 161, which goes on Van Horn. And Barclay is a closer stop to the yeshiva, and Van Horn, you have to walk a few blocks. And as I'm giving my long winding excuse why I'm late, Rabbi Feigelstock interrupts me and he says, Zag Refoel, I'm not interested. So I turned to him as I was a little chutzpahdik boy and I said, so why did you ask? You asked me why I was late. And Rabbi Feigelstock chuckled. He didn't answer. He just had a little smile and he didn't answer. And I've learned from Rabbi Feigelstock with this little small story, I learned that you don't always have to be the one who gets the last word in. In your dialogues with people, in your dealings with people, in your relationships, whether it's people who are older than you. When I first came to Broward County, my whole shul was 90% Holocaust survivors. So I always dealt with older people initially. If they're people who are your peers or they are younger than you, it's not always wisest to get the last word in. Just sometimes, like the Gemara says, Medushosak, Chassidus explains how Shtika is sometimes higher than Chochmah. Rabbi Feigelstock was quiet when I was chutzpahdik, but it taught me, don't always get the last word in. So I'm going to say another l'chaim, and I wish the family...
What are you drinking there?
I'm drinking
$2 Chuck.
Scotch from Max Rubenstein.
$2 Chuck.
Special bottle of Scotch. L'chaim. And let's
talk a little bit later about the other times that you talked to Rabbi Feigelstock. Okay, we're not going to get into it. There's a few hundred people on the line, but okay, we'll let it pass at this time. Anyways, Shekayach Rafe, I'll talk to you in a little while. I want to take this opportunity as the MC to make a little switch in the order. I was asked by the grandchildren of Rabbi Yitzchak Genevich that if he could come on. So Reb Beryl, I'm asking Mechila from you. You will go on next. But at this time, I would like to have the great honor and pleasure of introducing one of the pillars of the Montreal community for many years. I mean, the Mechanchim and the Askanim are great. But you know what? It takes also philanthropists. And this is a major philanthropist in Montreal, a beloved man. I mean, again, it doesn't need my introduction. But at this time, I'd like to call Reb Yitzchak Genevich, who had a very special relationship with Rabbi Ferguson from a young age, to please say a few words. Rabbi Yitzchak. Is he still there?
Can you hear me?
You haven't aged at all. Nothing. You still look like that young man that we all loved and cared about.
Listen, stop.
What?
Shooting the bull.
Come in.
Okay, Shalom Ber asked me that I should say something about my relationship with Rabbi Feigelstock. The relationship that I had with Harav Hatomim, Rab Reuven, Tzvi, Feigelstock, the truth is that I should add Harav Hatomim Hagoem, Rab Tzvi Yehuda Feigelstock. I used to be staying in his house, because when I came to the yeshiva in Tovshin Yud Zayin, the yeshiva didn't have a dormitory. So the Bochum stayed in different Balabatim, and I had the schus to stay by Rabbi Feigelstock's house. As a matter of fact, the yeshiva didn't even have a place for the Bochum to eat. And we used to eat by Rebbetzin Svardlov's parents. We ate our meals. I don't know if you guys remember, but this is what happened. So I had the schus of staying by Rabbi Feigelstock, and together with me was Rabbi Isaac Mintz and Eliyahu Engel. And the things that I remember from that staying in his house was, like other people mentioned already, the relationship between Rabbi Feigelstock and the Rebbetzin was something that we can all learn and practice in our lives. The covet that he gave his wife and the covet that she extended to him was very, very special. And everybody that knew him realized this special relationship they had. And I remember one instant of people mentioned the chesed that Rabbi Ferguson did with people. I remember one instance, I was very, very sick. I had 103 fever, and for 2 days, I couldn't eat anything. Rabbi Ferguson came into my room and he said, Yitzchak, you have to eat. If you want to get healthy, you have to eat. I said, no, I can't eat. So he started mentioning different foods that maybe I want to eat, and everything I said no. And then he started talking about different soups. And he said, this soup, maybe this soup, maybe this soup. And then he said, maybe a little bit of chicken soup. And I think he noticed that my refusal wasn't as hard as the other soups. Anyway, an hour later, Rabbi Ferguson walks in with a fresh chicken soup. It wasn't Friday, it wasn't Thursday, it was, I think, Tuesday or Wednesday. And he picked me up, sat me down, put 2 pillows in the back of me, and he fed me the chicken soup. This is one of the small things that Rabbi Ferguson was specialized in, is chesed and doing good things for other people. Rabbi Ferguson was the foundation of every institution in Montreal, whether it is Tzira Agudas Chabad, Yeshiva Shabbos Day Camp, Camp Gan Yisrael, every institution, Rabbi Feigelstock established the foundation of it at that time, and it's still standing on this solid foundation that he has established together with Rabbi Mochkin and other people that were in the community at that time. So I want to wish the family that they should have the schus, that the Rabbi Feigelstock should be a Ma'aletz Yosher for them and for all his friends and for the community in Montreal and for Klal Yisrael, that Eibishter should help us and take us out of this golus because of Mamish through Mashiach Tzidkenu b'meheru b'yameinu. Amen.
Amen. May Hashem bless you and your Rebbetzin. I'm sorry, and your wife. I mean, and may you continue to do the good work that you do, both for the Meistes in Montreal and the Meistes around the world, for many, many years until the Bias HaGadol. As was mentioned before, the Lubavitcher community in Montreal was started by 9 Talmidim that was sent to Montreal by the Frierdiker Rebbe. The tallest one of them was about 5'4", I think. He played center on the basketball team. Not sure who it was, Rabbi Weinberg or maybe somebody else, but I think the tallest was about 5'4". They may have been small in stature, but I'm telling you, they were giants in spirit. What they were able to build up in Montreal and to turn over the whole town was incredible. And Rabbi Feigelstock, even though he wasn't one of the original 9, but we could call him one of the original 10. He was right there at the beginning of this enterprise and was with them from day one. And there's many stories of his interaction with these nine Talmidim and founders of Montreal. But one of them, who was part of the original 9, was Rabbi Rodel. Rabbi Rodel was one of the 9 original founders. He may have been, I believe, the principal prior to Rabbi Feigelstock. I don't know how long he lasted, but eventually he went and opened up Rodel's store on I don't know if Van Horn was his original store, but as a kid, I remember Rodel's, and it became known throughout the entire city. You want something in Yiddishkeit, a sefer, a this or that, you go to Rodel's, Montreal Rodel's. You talk about a Stroigim, only Rodel's. I mean, it was amazing how this man, this was before computers and before the store was even organized. And if you wanted a set of Chamoshim, he knew exactly that the Bereshis was on the 4th shelf there. Shemais was in the basement. Vayikra, he might have had a home. Bamidbar, I think, is like behind my desk. And Devarim is somewhere. I mean, he had this phenomenal, amazing ability to know his store without being organized, with no computers, and everything was in his head. And it was a gun. And we have with us today one of his children, Reb Beryl, and his wife Alti, who today serves as a senior official in the government of Canada. And he, of course, I mean, grew up with the Feigelstocks and a Montreal product. And we're great honored to have him here today with us. And at this time, I mean, I'm sorry, Reb Beryl, that I jumped you, but at this time, I would like to have you come on, I guess, with your wife and to share some memories of your relationship with Rabbi Feigelstock. Reb Beryl Rodel. Is Reb Beryl Rodel here? Rabbi Itcha, if he's not here, you have to continue speaking. That's the rule. The last guy has to continue speaking after the next guy doesn't show up. So think about a few stories quickly, Rabbi Itcha. Make them up if you have to. We don't.
Okay.
Beryl, I'm telling you, I remember you when I was a little kid in Montreal. I remember you and same. You look the same.
Baruch Hashem. So where to begin? Like Sarah and Hashi Feigelstock, my wife and I are also, you get 2 for the price of 1. And more proof that the Rebbe works in mysterious ways, as we all know. Probably as a result of this conversation, Alti discovers a new relative who would be Raphael Tenenhaus, because she too is from Bukovina, and she too arrived in Canada in Bathurst to be with family called Dolphin. Did you know this, Raphael?
You better be careful, Beryl. He's a shliach. Okay, you may find a new relative. As soon as the next thing you know,
I know all about the animal.
Okay. I'm just warning you.
Yes.
It's new to me. Reb Beryl, it's new to me.
So you and Alti should follow up offline. I should mention also that Alti is a very busy person. She left government long ago. We now are together involved, apart from many other things, in a quixotic venture called the Ukrainian Jewish Encounter, which is to some degree Bukovina. When Alti finally concludes that, she will complete a historical work called L9, which is really a deep dive into the history of the Untitled. So Alti, she can tell you about it if she likes, but she's interviewed all of the 9. Not all are remained today. But part of the story that is about the 9 and not about the 9 is the story of the Jewish alien internees, which included Hashi Feigelstock and many of the others. So Alti knows quite a bit of the history of that group, which included many people who ended up in the yeshiva. But it's good to have a new relation. We're all, for me also, I kept thinking of what pride both Her Majesty the Queen and Shakespeare would have hearing the glorious ways in which the English language has adapted and expanded, as we've heard over the last hours during this Shloshim observance. Does your Zaidi go to shul every Shabbos? You know, that sort of, but it's a very rich language that we've adapted. So Hashi Feigelstock succeeded my father as principal. My father couldn't afford to remain as principal because he had to pay himself and had to pay the others first, leaving nothing for himself, which is why he ended up with a sideline of Sforim and Kodesh, and none of that would have been possible without my mother. So anybody who visited Rodal's would know that it was a joint venture. It was a joint venture, very much. And this is a little beside the point, but not, can't talk about my father, about the 9, including about Feigelstock. That story is a little different, without paying honor and respect to Shuni Sugihara, who was the great Japanese samurai official who went out of his way, to say the least, to provide exit visas, entry into Japan for, he saved the whole Mir Yeshiva, and he saved my father, and he saved the Lubavitcher Chassidim, who were able to make their way out of Europe thanks to him. So whenever there's an opportunity to pay honor and respect to Shuni Sugihara, I do this. So I say L'chaim to the spirit of Shuni Sugihara, more importantly, L'chaim to the neshama of Hashi Feigelstock and to the family. What naches he has from hearing all the outpouring of love. That is what we're hearing, more than respect. I started to say L'chaim, so I have to say Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shakal b'dvarei.
Amen.
Amen.
What we hear is an outpouring of love. And that, as we say here in Ottawa, Canada, is a case of Kemayim aponim leponim. Hashi was about love.
So I am here. And since you pulled me in, I will say a few things very, very briefly. Maybe begin with our wedding picture, which is behind you, Beryl.
You just trumped me. I was about, okay, you talk.
Well, you can show
we
it.
don't want any machlokes in here, please. It's all about love. So
yes.
yeah, please.
So in this picture at our wedding in 1967, in the background is Rabbi Feigelstock. You might show it, Beryl.
I can't. I was looking for it before.
It's right behind. What's on top here? It's just behind you on top. I see it. Anyways, the important thing is that he was a loving presence at our wedding.
Was Cupid. You see him in the background?
Of course. Absolutely.
He was always lurking in the relationship it was under his blessed hashpoeh, if you want. He particularly loved Alti because she, in his view, very rightly, she was the person who saved Beryl's soul from who knows what.
Well, I spent many an afternoon with Sarah Feigelstock as a girl on Shabbat afternoons, and it had an impact. He wrote our ketubah. Many years later, I think it was in 2006, I visited him and did a video interview with him about his early days in the yeshiva, his background as a boy. And this is something that I want to, in due course, I will find it and share it with the family. I had the interest was with the Nintel. Only 5 were alive at the time when I was doing the interviews, but I gathered information from relatives for the other 5 as well. And his was a beautiful interview. I think, and then there was the time in the archives when I find documents that tell me about this boy in the intern camps and in the internee camps and with others, with the Felegs and so on, and how they are gathered into the bosom of the Nintel who were in Montreal at the time. All very moving because I knew the picture years later and saw the beginnings of how the yeshiva came to being. So that's about it. And
Amen. Amen. Amen.
Yes, so when I told my father, I should tell you a little story, when I told my father that I would be marrying Alti, he sat down and wept real tears. And he said, Baruch Hashem, about 20 times. Baruch Hashem, Baruch Hashem, Baruch Hashem. And he then said, "If all these are grace rachmanis, but who am I to argue with God?" Anyway, kach hava. But for me, Hashi Feigelstock was, my father was the first principal. Label Kramer was chief commissar and director, but it was family, pure family. Never thought of Hashi Feigelstock as anything other than the most loving member of the intimate family that we were. He wrote the text of the Matsevos for both mother and father. Moshe Kotlarski had an important role in this as well because he ran them by the Rebbe. But the Hashi was a real craftsman, informed by artistry and great sensitivity. Great sensitivity. I particularly remember the sensitivity of the text he wrote for my Uncle Meyer, who had a bitter life, and it's all reflected so beautifully in this text. So it's a reflection of a number of aspects of Hashi Feigelstock. His person, his artistry, his lomdus, but above all, his sensitivity to the individual life, soul of the person he was relating to. So we were close. We were very close. But what we hear in this celebration, this Shloshim, is how close he was and how much he touched so many people. So we say in the Welt, Tei Zechrono Baruch. This is, if it's ever the case, it's surely the case for Hashi. So once again, I feel it was when I was asked by Josh whether I would be prepared to talk. What a question, Avade. And it's a pleasure and a privilege. And I'm very happy also for this bath in family, which the Shloshim represents. L'chaim.
L'chaim, l'chaim, Beryl.
Good to gebench to your this Gregorian New Year coming. L'chaim.
Thank you so much, Beryl. All the best to you and your family. Yasher Kayach, Yasher Kayach. We all benefited from that Rodel store. No question about it. No question about it. Our next speaker is a well-known shliach in Montreal. He has a talent that many of us, even though we tried hard, he actually knows how to speak the common language, French. So maybe Reb Zush is going to tell us to speak French to us. I'm not sure. We're still debating over this. But he is the director of Chabad Shabanel, besides being just an international advocate for many, many causes. It's our great pleasure and honor to ask Reb Zusha Zilberstein to please say a few words with his relationship with Rabbi Feigelstock. Reb Zusha, comment ça va?
Since I didn't speak to Rabbi Feigelstock in French, I guess I'll keep it in English.
You didn't?
No, usually not. I had the privilege, as soon as I got engaged actually into the Sputz family, I immediately gained a great friend. I was immediately adopted as a friend to Rabbi Feigelstock. I will spare the editorializing because I think we've heard a lot of it, of the qualities, etc. But I want to share a few stories as they are, and everybody will be able to take from it whatever they feel they can. And I think these few stories, out of numerous, because we had a lot of interaction with Rabbi Feigelstock, I think these indicate some of his many, many qualities. A story that he told me more than once, that before the Nisias, he was in 770. I'm not sure if it was Chalamoid Sukkot or Chalamoid Pesach. I can't say for certain. But the Rebbe met him in the hallway out of Maskiras. And the Rebbe stopped him and the Rebbe asked him, "Du schreibst Chalamoid?" And we all know to what extent Rabbi Ferguson was a tremendous machmir and so on. Yes. And immediately said, "Zicher." He realized the Rebbe wants something from him. And that was before the Nisias. And he said, "Yeah, Zicher." So the Rebbe called him into Maskiris, and the Rebbe asked him to sign a letter for him. Story. Another interesting story, which I think is worth sharing, maybe following what Rabbi Sputz said earlier about in the Gazette, he told me the story without telling me that it happened with him, but my hunch, and this is a guess, that it might have happened with him. During a Yechidus, as he said, a younger man, again, he didn't say to him, but my guess is that it was actually him. The Rebbe asked this younger man in Yechidus about a certain event related to a certain younger man. And this younger man did not answer. And the Rebbe asked the second time. And again, he avoided answering. When the Rebbe asked a third time, he couldn't avoid it anymore. And he told the Rebbe, ich seh doch, als der Rebbe weiß, die was dafür sein der, was hat Gerem seinem Rebbe Magnus Nefesh. I realized that the Rebbe knows, so why should I be the one to cause havoc the Rebbe? And as Rabbi Ferguson told me, the Rebbe answered him, aber Rabbi kann wissen, bederech hateva, für was darf man das dann lemeilen mit derech hateva. The third story, which I want to share, and I'll conclude with this, story that he told me on a number of occasions for different reasons, but this one was specifically related. We had a whole conversation about Mashiach, the Emunah Mashiach, etc. So he told me the tale that I might. There was a Verbrengen in Yutas Kislev in Kfar Chabad. 2-3 o'clock in the morning, as the Verbrengen was winding down, somebody heard that in Rishon, Reb Shoel Brook is still Verbrengen. So the 8 people who were still left at the Verbrengen in Kfar Chabad decided to go to Rishon. Look, it's a half hour, 45-minute drive. So now they need the driver and they need a car. Turned out there was only one car available. And the driver was one of those 8 who were in the middle of Verbrengen. They got into the car. All of them had Zettel Chaim. And you can imagine how this little car was driving on the highways, the byways, till finally they were stopped by a policeman. As they rolled down the window, the policeman nearly fainted from the smell of the mashke. And he looked in, he couldn't believe his eyes. 8 people sitting in this small little car. The driver is, Baruch Hashem, ganz begelufen. And he pulled them all out, and he gave this driver a ticket from here to who knows where. Kitzer, he has to come to court. I tell you the story the way Rabbi Feigelstock told me the story, and I said on a number of occasions. He comes to court. The younger man, first of all, went to a lawyer, trying to get the lawyer to help him out. And when he told the lawyer what happens, he said, what's the point of me coming to court? If this is what happened, if you don't end up in jail just with a ticket, with a fine, you'll be lucky. Driving under the influence, endangering all the 8 people, all the people on the road, endangering Akitza, it is a serious issue. Sure. The younger man comes to court by himself. And the policeman is there, and he's being accused of exactly 8 people sitting drunk in a car, and the driver drunk, etc. Fine. When the judge turns around to this younger man and asks him, what have you got to say for yourself? So he said, Adoni HaShofet, my dear judge, I would invite you to come outside and look at the car. And you tell me, you just look at the car and tell me if the story makes sense. The judge said, valid point, goes outside. There is this little Israeli car. And the judge asks the policeman, is this the car? He said, yes. And you are trying to convince me that 8 people were inside this car that you counted? He said, that's what happened. So the judge says, you know what? Were they children? Were they adults? Were they big size? Average size. Okay. Get me 8 average people and see if they can get into this car. The first state said it was impossible to get 8 people into this car. Okay. Case dismissed. Finished. Obviously, it's a Bobbermeister. Policeman was waiting for this younger man after the court. And he went over to the younger man and says, you know what? Kol hakavod lecha. I respect you. You didn't lie. You didn't make up a story. You and I know the truth that you guys were drunk and there was 8 people in there. But I give you respect. You pulled it off right and you didn't say any sheker at all. But tell me, how did you 8 get in there? And I remember Rabbi Ferguson said it with such passion. Wie sind ihr alle 8 rein? And the young man answered, will mit der Nemes ankommen zu verbringen, wird mir kennen. Und es ist ein Platz von der Chayit. If you really want to get to a verbringen, you will get there and there will be place for another Yid. I think these 3 stories symbolize a lot of the qualities. And Rabbi Feigelstock concluded, der Rebbe will, soll mit der Nemes werden, die Gule wird es Tage sein. Und soll der Rebbe helfen, es soll schön sein.
Amen. Yeshkayach, 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 Reb Zusha. Thank you so very much. I think we're coming close to the end, and we have a very special speaker, Mrs. Linda Rosenblum, who worked for years with Rabbi Feigelstock in the office and had a very close relationship since she was a teenager with both Rabbi and Mrs. Feigelstock. And I would like to ask her now to please share some words and memories of her special relationship with Rabbi Feigelstock. Mrs. Rosenblum.
Hi, good afternoon to everybody, family, friends, and distinguished speakers. As I was listening to everybody speak, I was trying to think like, how could I be different? But I don't have a white beard, so maybe that's my difference here. I'm very honored and humbled to be able to share in this memorial. I'm very happy that I was asked to share my special and personal relationship with both Sarah and Rabbi Feigelstock. They played a very big part in my life and have very, very fond memories of them. I was 16 when I actually first met the Feigelstock family. I think to help you understand a little bit about our how the relationship started, I'll have to give a little bit of background to where I'm coming from. My parents were from Europe. They came here to Canada before the war, and they met here and they got married. But they were having difficulty having a child. And I think my parents were married something like 14 years when my mother finally got pregnant. I was told that when she was told in the doctor's office that she was pregnant, that my father passed out. I'm saying this only to bring out a point that because of this, as a result, I was very spoiled. From day one, I mean, even when I was small, I was very strong-minded and knew what I wanted and sort of told my parents what to do. But my parents were traditional. I came from a traditional family, but I went to a secular school. And when I was in grade 10, like a year before my graduation, I came home and told my parents, I want to quit school. And I don't know why. I mean, I was a good student, but I was anxious to go to work. And unfortunately, my parents couldn't really do anything about it. So I went to work. I had been working during the summers and during the holidays. So I guess that gave me a taste of going to work. But after I got a job and after I worked for a few months, I thought perhaps I should go back at night to pick up some courses and to try and finish high school. Now, to me, this is a amazing story of Hashgacha Pratis, and you'll see as I go along. So I went to school, and in my class was a very nice girl. We became very fast friends. And she told me, I have 2 brothers. Maybe you want to meet one. And I said, sure, why not? Now, I was only 16. She did not know that. And I didn't know she was only 16. And I said sure, and we went. We went out and we had our first date and we had a second date, and the rest actually is history. So once things started getting serious, I came home and I told my mother, I said, I think I'm going to start keeping Shabbos. I mean, my husband came from an observant family. I came from a traditional family, but keeping Shabbos wasn't anything new to me because I had one uncle, my mother's brother, that was Shomer Shabbos. And from when I was a baby till I was a teenager, we used to share a house in the country. So it was nothing new to me, and it was something that was part of me, and I was happy to do it. So after we were going out a few months and we saw that it was getting serious, my husband said, I'd like you to meet someone. Her name is Sarah Feigelstock, and I'd like you to learn with her. So I said, sure, why not? The first time I went to the Feigelstock's house, I mean, you have to realize I was 16. I was not in my comfort zone. And I met Sarah, and she was the most unbelievable, sweet person that I had ever met. Such a nice smile, and she made me feel so comfortable. And we started learning, and in this room, I think it was the room in the front, so I don't know if it was a living room, there was a couch, but the room had books from floor to ceiling, wall to wall. I was like so amazed, and I love to read, and I had a bookcase made especially for my room to hold all my books. So when I saw this, I said, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And also the times that I used to learn with Sarah, practically every single time, if Rabbi Feigelstock was home, he always walked by and sort of stuck his head in and smiled and said hello. I was they made me feel very comfortable there. And then I started eating there, Shabbosim. And again, this was not my milieu. I mean, I was an only child, and here they had 5 kids running around. I call them the first batch because she had first batch and then she had the second batch. And I think the first batch was, if I remember correctly, it was Yossi and Sterni and Rivki and Avrami and Chayil. She was the baby. And I used to eat their Shabbos, and I loved it. I felt, they made me feel like family. I was at home. And without fail, Rabbi Ferguson and Sarah always walked me home. I lived about 8 blocks away, but they didn't want to let me go myself, and they always walked me home. Anyway, then things got, closer to our due date, and we had a vort. The vort was in my in-laws' house. And again, I was an only child, and my parents came. It was very small because it was a very small house, and but there was my husband, and he had his siblings and his family, and I think there might have been a few close friends. And Rabbi Feigelstock, of course, and Sarah were there, and he spoke beautifully. But what was the main thing that I took away from there that I'll never forget? You have to remember, my parents were out of their comfort zone. They were like, they didn't know anybody there, but they were there because their daughter is getting engaged. And Rabbi Feigelstock spoke, and then he turned to my parents and he said, we only just met and I don't really know you, but I know that you must be wonderful people to have brought up a daughter like this. And I was so touched that he was so sensitive and so caring. And my mother, of course, was crying and whatever. It was beautiful. And then that was in November. And then a couple of months later was our wedding. And again, Rabbi Feigelstock was there, and he helped us with the preparations, and he helped us, to let us know what to do and the Seder of the whole thing. And then I was married, and for a few years. In the beginning, I'm gonna pay for this, but my husband was very particular in what he ate, and he only wanted to eat what I cooked. He wouldn't eat anything else. And I was getting so frustrated. And I said, look, I don't understand. Why can't you have some cornflakes? It's only cereal. I said, even Rabbi Feigelstock eats cereal. So my husband turned to me and he said, what? When I'll be like Rabbi Feigelstock, then I'll eat cereal. He was just played a very big part in our lives. And again, I skipped another time when I was learning there still, before I was married. It was one of the girls' birthdays. I don't remember which one. And I had bought a little gold necklace. And Rabbi Feigelstock turned to his daughter and he said, you see how she cares for you? This isn't 10 karat gold. This is 18 karat gold. And I was floored. Like, I figured, like, this is something that he picked up on, and he was so sharp. Anyway, getting back to after being married, and I had my first baby. And we had somewhere to go. I don't remember what. I was married the baby was maybe a month old. And one of the girls, I don't remember, both of them sat for me, both Sterni and Rivki. They were 12 years old. And when my family found out that I left a newborn baby with a 12-year-old, they couldn't get over it. Like, how could you do that? I said, are you kidding? I said, I would trust them above an 18-year-old from any other family, because they were so caring, and they were used to having kids around and taking care of kids. Let's see, what else? He also, then I ended up working in the yeshiva. The first time, I was there twice. The first time was when I had only a few kids, and Dr. Mendelson there was a secular principal, and he asked me to come work with him. He wanted me to help him in the office to set up the files and organize it. So I was there for 5 years. And at that time, Rabbi Feigelstock was the principal for Limud Kodesh. And we had a very nice relationship. I mean, from time to time, we would have to discuss something about school, and I would go in his office. And his office was, I can't even begin to tell you, piled with books and papers on the chairs, on the desk, everywhere. And I said, Rabbi Feigelstock, I'll be happy to help you organize it so that you can, He says, no. He says, I know exactly where everything is, and I like it like this. And many times also, like, he had an amazing sense of humor. I mean, he used to sometimes just tell us a joke, and then he had that infectious laugh that I used to love to hear. During that time, or a little after that, my father had passed away, and Rabbi Feigelstock again was there to help out, and he arranged for the plot, and he matzeva everything. And then I was working, I think, for the Chabad house for about 17 years. And then many years later, I again ended up in the yeshiva, in the administrative position. And at that time, he was already retired, but he was on the board and very, very active in everything that went on to the yeshiva. I mean, his love for the yeshiva was prevalent over everything. I just want to say that Rabbi Feigelstock and Sarah were an amazing, amazing couple. I mean, everybody said it already. They were very close. Their love for each other was beautiful to see. They brought up beautiful children. And as I said, I always felt like I was part of the family. And I just feel I was very, very privileged to have known them. And I wish all the children a Richis Yomim, and he should have a lichtigen Geneden, and his neshama should have an aliyah. And thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. I remember very well your first round in yeshiva when we were in a high school. Dr. Mendelson, Mr. Hutchison, and Linda. When you had to go to Linda, you had to go to Linda in the office. Okay, fine, all right, okay. We won't get into it.
I still have a little statuette that your class bought for me that says "World's Best Secretary." I still have it. It's sitting in my kitchen.
There you go. Thank you so much, Linda.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. I mean, this concludes the formal part of the program. Everyone was just incredible speakers. We're going to conclude this program of course, it wouldn't be right if we didn't hear from one of Rabbi Feigelstock's themselves. We have a number of Rabbi Feigelstocks, here, and I'm not sure because I'm getting conflicting reports whether it's going to be Rabbi Yossi or Rabbi Avrami or whether both. I mean, to me, it's all right that maybe Shalom Ber, maybe Josh. I don't care who it is. But before I pass on, there's one thing I just want to mention: the stories about Rabbi Feigelstock. We heard about him so many times. One of the highlights that I always keep remembering is when Josh got married and Rabbi Feigelstock and his Rebbitzin came to the wedding. We were able to make my son-in-law close. We made out Sheva brachas for Josh in the backyard, and Rabbi Feigelstock came there. And, to have him there without having all of the distractions that he's always had. I always remember him in Yeshiva. He was running and doing and 50 different things. Well, I had them all to myself right now, and I wasn't in 4th grade anymore. I was already a shliach, and I had my kids, and I had a chance to sit with him for a long time and just have a conversation with him. And I remember one story that he told me that I'd just like to share. And this is when he first got into Lubavitch. And the 9 guys that were there, he ended up going to a Shabbos with Reb Mendel Tenenbaum. So it was him and Reb Mendel Tenenbaum went to a Balabas's house, some person here in Montreal for dinner, whatever it was, Suda Shabbos. Anyways, after the meal, the hostess, which was very gracious, of course, they finished off the meal and she brought out a plate of cookies for dessert. And as Rabbi Feigelstock telling me that in my house, where I grew up in Wien, there was a custom to take dessert. Yes. So she passed around the plate and Rabbi Feigelstock took a couple of cookies and had it. And then Rabbi Mendel Tenenbaum said, and then so it was over. And that night, Rabbi Mendel Tenenbaum comes to him and says, Herschel, Mele, you take dessert as Einzach, but 2 cookies. Why 2 cookies? I mean, and he told me this story with such a slavus, with such a bren. He says, this is what the guys were all about. This is where the Montreal community, was founded on this kind of love and caring for Hasidus and Rebbe and Iskashrus. And this grabbed him and took him in completely, like you immerse yourself in a mikveh, 100%. And everything that everyone said today is only a small little kernel to what the giant of a man that he really was. So I want to thank you personally to the Feigelstock family for allowing me these few minutes over here. And I'm sure that I speak for everybody that spoke and for everybody that listened and for everyone that's going to listen to this. You know what? You guys are lucky that you won the lottery and Ashkacha Pratius, that this was your father and you spent time with him and he educated you and he raised you. And I hope again for the next generation, for your children, Yossi and Avremi and everybody and your grandchildren, Eineklach, you should be very, very, very proud of this person that we call Rabbi Feigelstock, the principal, the friend, the colleague, the mentor, that he was a very, very special man. And I just wish the Feigelstock family just to take that he should be a Melitz Yesher for all of you and your entire family. And maybe we reunited together with him and with the coming of Mashiach, at this time, I would like to conclude the program with, is it going to be, just raise your hand if it's going to be Reb Avram or it's going to be Reb Yosef, whichever one. Who's going to conclude this program?
Okay, I guess I was voted in, I guess, by my
So I just want to say that Avram was a
The
close
elections
friend
are
of
not
mine.
concluded yet. Well, who's voting you in? The elections are not finalized, Rabbi Feigelstock.
Okay. Who's this? Who's speaking?
Who's speaking?
Rabbi Zirkin.
It's kein Rabbi. Revolt bring us acid.
I should have known it was going to take a Zirkin to jump in over here, uninvited. Okay, Yeshakayach. Shkayach. All right, Reb Avram, please take it away. Izzy. Now I see you.
Yeah,
Okay.
what's up? It's the free speech. What happened to that? All right, let's.
There's no free speech in Canada.
I'm in Chicago where the gun laws prevail, so let's be careful on who.
Okay, Shkayach. Rabbi Avram, please take it away.
So, with WhatsApp, you get instant notifications. So when I said voter, my brothers asked me, my family, at least on the WhatsApp, asked me to conclude the program. So first of all, a huge Ashikayach Abba, Rabbi Abba Permutter, I should say now. I know him as Abba, and I have very fond memories of times together, both in Montreal and later in New York. So you did an absolute fantastic job. And I must say, going through the mourning period and going through Avelis is difficult. And I'm sure I'm speaking on behalf of my entire family. You brought a lot of smiles to our faces today and helped us tremendous through this difficult time. For that, I want to give you a tremendous Yasher Koyach. Thank you so much for agreeing and for being there. And I know it was a long program, but I appreciate tremendously what you brought to it and agreeing to do this. I also want to thank all the speakers who each one touched us in such a profound way. Some of them brought tears to our eyes, some of them brought smiles to our eyes. But for us, this is a very, very important time because it gives us the ability to see my father from a different perspective. Sometimes children, you see from one perspective, and you hear so many different perspectives, and it's so helpful to us, to our children, to our grandchildren. And no words could thank every one of the speakers who took time off their busy schedule today to come on. For those of you who sent messages, tremendous Yasher Koyach. Thank you so much. The Eibshter's help that we should be zeicher to the kiyum of Yud, V'kitzu, V'ran, V'shech Ne'ofer, V'hu B'seichem, together with the Rebbe leading us out of this Golos, V'mheira V'yomeinu Amen. Now, I also want to mention that if anybody has more stories to share, of those of you who have videos, clips of my father, interviews of my father, really would be very, very helpful. We're trying to put things together, so it would be very, very helpful if you could send them to the WhatsApp group, which is on the website, or to, I think there's an email to be sent to. It's on the website. If you go to the website, feigelstock.com, there is a link there, both to the WhatsApp. If you don't have time to write an email, if you want to leave a voice message, you can leave a voice message. If you want to leave us an email or send us a file, tremendous, we'll really, really appreciate it as we're trying to put things together. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you to the Feigelstock family. Thank you for organizing this. I think this was very cathartic for many people. I mean, to be able to share some stories about your illustrious father. And again, may he just, look over you and be a good Tibeta for your family. Thank you all for participating and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Josh, you don't want to say anything? Josh, come on. The baby.
Definitely their lives are marked. And here we're only hearing like a very small part of this history, this life. But really, it did give an insight what very few people knew and saw, the insight of my parents. And I thank everybody for participating. And we should be able to continue what my father planted into us, that they should pass on to our children, to our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren. This is not something that a month ago it ended. It still lives in us, and we live with it, and we remember it, and we have it in our hearts and our minds, and continue what he taught us.
Oh yeah, this is it. Last chance. 1, 2, 3. All right. Thank you very much, everybody, and have a wonderful evening. Goodbye.